Good morning to my friends from Tweed Church of Christ. I'm recording this message for tomorrow's live stream. So it's Saturday now, but I will be there in person tomorrow at the Sports Centre and then for lunch afterwards in the park. So anyway, I'll probably be a very similar message tomorrow morning as well. So don't feel like you're missing out, those who are actually on the live stream. This week has been a great week for Marie and I, and we welcomed our family up from Sydney during the school holidays. And so we've had a house full of extra people, including 4 grandchildren. So today is a lot quieter at our house than it has been in the last several days, but we're actually missing the noise. And anyway, some of you that have grandchildren probably know what I'm talking about. We are very much missing the extra joy that's been surrounding us for the last few days. This week we celebrated another milestone at the Winslow, which is where I do a lot of my work as chaplain. And so the Winslow actually is better known, or is also known as the Lismore Soup Kitchen. And so Lismore Soup Kitchen started in the basement of Lismore Church of Christ almost 31 years ago. And one man, Don Ferguson, decided that he would just feed people, make an extra meal at night or a few extra meals, and share that with people who he knew were having a bit of a hard time. And so he did that from the basement of that downtown building in Lismore. So here we are, 31 years later almost, but also 11 years since the Lismore Soup Kitchen has had its home in the old Winslow Hotel in Lismore. And so the Winslow Hotel is a grand old facility that has 18 rooms, and even during COVID we're able to feed people every day and cook up a great lunch. You know, there are amazing volunteers, and although we didn't cut a cake for our 11 years in the Winslow on Friday, there was a lot of joy and celebration amongst the volunteers. We really do have the most extraordinary group of people who just give of themselves as volunteers, doing the most amazing things. Next week at the Winslow we're hoping to open the doors, so we have some fairly good COVID safe plans in place to be able to give people a sit down meal instead of giving them a takeaway to take away and eat somewhere else. So yeah, the Winslow has been a place of community, and it still is a place of community. And it's probably one of the things people need more than ever before during these very difficult times that we've been experiencing. You know, I was thinking about my friend Don that I just mentioned, who started the Winslow or the Soup Kitchen so many years ago. And it seems to me that from little things, big things grow. And Don's idea, he probably had no idea that his idea would still be going today, and that his idea would be planted in so many hearts and lives. You know, God calls us to take one step at a time, to do the things that he's calling us to in any particular time. And so we put one foot after the other, and sometimes God plants and waters the most amazing things that flourish and bloom and grow. And so today I just want to bring a word of encouragement in that regard to Tweed Church of Christ, because it seems to me that God has planted some ideas for some extraordinary work that you can do in that community. And so I just really like to encourage you today, to encourage you to continue to serve God, to see him in the plans, even when the plans don't seem to be working as they could. I know how easy it is to lose energy, to be to lose your momentum as things don't work out quite as you hope they would. And so I'd encourage you to keep your eyes open, keep focused on what you think it is that God wants you to do, and God will open doors. He will show a way, he'll make a way through. The person of Joseph in the Old Testament is, I think, one of the people who teaches us about that. You know, the Bible is full of amazing history, amazing stories of people who have faced the most extraordinary circumstances and done the most extraordinary things. Ordinary people serving an extraordinary God. And Joseph was one of those people. I'm not sure whether any person can ever claim perfection, but I see in Joseph a model of someone who, even though he did face quite difficult circumstances, still seemed to keep his focus on the God whom he loved and served. You might know in the story of Joseph how, as a 17-year-old, he got offside with his brothers, probably for sharing some big dreams that included him and sounded like he was a bit higher and mightier than his brothers. And so his brothers were offside, but I'm not sure that Joseph's dreams and his sharing of those dreams really earned the actions that the brothers foisted on Joseph. They saw him coming towards them, and there was a discussion about doing him in, but they decided to put him down a hole instead. But then they sold him to some slave traders and sent him off to a far country, thinking he would never be seen of or heard of again. And so they dipped his beautiful multicoloured coat into some animal's blood, and they gave it to the dad and said, "Oh, it looks like Joseph's gone." The dad, of course, was devastated. There are all sorts of things in this world that we might be frightened of or fearful of. And maybe Joseph didn't walk into that situation being fearful, but it could be that he became a very fearful person after that because of what he'd experienced. It's an interesting thing about fear is that sometimes fear is only what we think might happen. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm a little bit creative with my anxiety. I imagine all sorts of scenarios and things that might happen that may not really come to pass or really be true. And so I invest a whole lot of energy into worrying about something that I probably have no need to worry about at all. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't things that we need to be careful of or to even consider or to even have some feeling of anxiety about. But I suppose I'm just saying let's not be too creative about how much we worry. So as I think about this man of Joseph and the things that he suffered next, I think about how he was bought by someone and as a slave and served in that household and served so well that he became trusted. It seems to me that serving well in whatever thing that we're given to do is part of the key of this. So he served well in this household. Yet, because of circumstance, he found himself falling from grace and ended up in prison. Again, something to be very worried about. But here again, he served so well in prison that he was actually put in charge of various areas of the prison itself. And to me, that's extraordinary. I suppose the prison of that era may not have been the same as prisons today. I have some friends who have been in prison, and a couple of these friends in particular are people who, during their time in prison, have actually discovered what it is to follow Jesus and have found Jesus in the midst of the despair that they have faced. So what a gift that is for someone to find Jesus in the midst of that long holiday that none of my friends ever wanted to take. And so there are things that can make you anxious. And I suppose going from that place to eventually being in front of the Pharaoh, the greatest leader in the known world of the time. And so I guess there would be some anxiety in that. But also then going from that place to then becoming second in charge of that nation. Surely there would be much for Joseph to be anxious about in that time and that place. Yet in all of these things, it seems as if Joseph just continued to trust God, to put his faith in God, and to honour God, and to honour others in what he did. So there are times and places to be anxious. But I suppose the key that we learn from Joseph is that there is also a God to be trusted in the midst of the worst circumstances of all. So that's one thing that I learn about Joseph, or from his life, that even though there is cause for anxiety, that God can be trusted in the midst. The other thing that I learn about Joseph is that there are a ton of jobs to do. And so, as I said, Joseph just seemed to put his best foot forward in all the tasks and activities that his circumstances brought him to. And so, whatever circumstances you have, I'd just encourage you to put your best foot forward, to actually know that God is with you, but then to embrace whatever it is that is the task that before you. When we talk about the things that we are called to do, I think sometimes there is a misunderstanding in church life that it's all about being as busy as you possibly can be. But I actually don't think that's what God has in mind for us, that we just be simply busy, because it's not just about doing, it's about the overall and overarching plan that God might have. I heard it once said, Jesus is coming, everyone look busy, as if Jesus is going to come and check up on us and make sure that we're all got our, doing and working as hard as we can. But I actually don't see it like that. I think that God calls us to activity, but it's an activity that engages in the divine plan and drama that he is mapping out, that he invites us to participate in that. And so I see that in the life of Joseph. He was certainly called to some extraordinary things and some big tasks. I think one of the big things for Joseph, it's probably me, one of the big things for me is knowing what to say when you are in particular places. And so sometimes you might be shaking in your boots because you really don't know what to say or how to behave, or the shaking itself brings you to a place of, embarrassment. Anyway, can I just encourage you, if that's you, like it is me sometimes, to just put your best foot forward and do whatever it is you can, because Jesus himself promises us that when we're in those places where we don't know what to say, how to behave, what to do, that the Spirit himself will give us the words, that he will give us the attitudes, the behaviours, the words to say in the most difficult of circumstances. So can I encourage you, if that's you, to do that? I remember being in a Meet the Politicians seminar once, and a very dear friend of mine who, she does have a difficult history, and so she'd prepared a question for all of the politicians or potential politicians on this panel in Lismore one time, and through shaking and through her extreme nervousness, she read out this very detailed and well thought through question, that when she'd finished reading her question, that even though she felt like she had failed because her own body had let her down in shaking and not being able to get the words out right, she received a standing ovation from the people who were in the meeting with her, and then each politician or potential politician answered her question as best as they could. So whether, if you ever get to stand in a place before people, you might be shaking your boots, but just, put the best foot forward and see what God can do, even through your inadequacy and the weakness, because it seems to me that God quite often will use the weaknesses we have. And so, there is a big scary world out there, as I said, but God is the one who walks with us. And there are a ton of big jobs to do, and some days we just don't know how we're going to do them, but we just put our best foot forward with Jesus and we keep on going. And then, ultimately, there is a purpose to fulfill. And so just in closing, I want to tell you about how right at the end of Genesis in the chapter 50, we see this scenario where Joseph is face to face with his brothers, and his brothers are really worried because Joseph is here, this most powerful man in Egypt, and they're really thinking that Joseph is going to give them a hard time. It's just after their father has died, and I suppose the brothers are feeling like, oh, now that Dad's died, there's nothing holding Joseph back from payback, from getting back at us for what we did to him all those years ago. And so Joseph, he's talking to his brothers, like he tells them, hey, no, it's not like that at all. So I'd like to just read to you from Genesis 50, and it's verse 20. He says this: "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." And so as I think about that, I think about the greater purpose that God has each of us called to, particularly for Joseph. So here, even though things had gone so bad so many times along the way, that for Joseph, he could actually see that God had a plan and purpose through it all. And I'm not saying that God creates the evil things that actually happen to people, but it seems to me that even in the worst case, God can retrieve a situation and he can turn it around for good, for a good, grand, ultimate purpose. Sometimes I talk with people who feel as if they have lost, they've lost out on what God might have done through them. But I actually don't see it that way, because God walks with us through whatever we have done. And so even if we have walked away from God at times, God still walks with us, and he's there at that moment, at that time. And as soon as we turn to him, he will help us to redeem whatever situation that is. And so for that, I am just so thankful, because of the times that I know I have failed. So thank you, Jesus, that you call us on this path of renewal, this path that actually takes us to a wonderful place where we are aligned with his plan and purpose. So I thank you today for listening, and I pray God's blessing upon you. May you gain some inspiration from this short talk about the life of Joseph and what that might mean for us today. Bless you all. See ya.